Today we are going live again with a beautiful monochromatic card design, and I'm really excited to share this design because this involves one of my absolute favorite kits. Now this is the Arched Foliage Kit by Altenew, something that I absolutely love, absolutely adore. Now this one, why I love this kit so much is that it comes with everything that you need to create a card with coordinating products. We have the stamp, we have embossing folders, we have stencils, and well, we also have the add-on. Now this is Craft Your Life project kit. This is a monthly subscription kit which you can get from Altenew, and I absolutely love this kit. I love how big and detailed this design is. We have some absolutely fun sentiments on this. You can create a thank you card, a card with just a note, so blessed, hugs, and all of these have coordinating sentiment dies that you can cut out to create a beautiful sentiment note for your card front. And this beautiful foliage, it's big enough to fit into either your 5x7 cards or even A2 size card, which is what we are going to create today, and some sub sentiments which I absolutely adore. Now, for our card today, we will be creating a monochromatic look. We will be well, not stamping, but using the embossing folder that comes with the kit, and we will be embossing and die cutting this image. Now, the die will cut out the entire image. So to save us some time, I have already done that for you guys. I first die cut our arched foliage using the coordinating die. Now this, for reference, is big enough or is bigger than your standard A2 size card base. This is my standard A2 size card base, and definitely this is big enough. So you could either frame it or use it on a bigger card, or well, I might just go ahead and chop off any of that excess. Now after cutting this image, I ran it through the embossing folder. I'll show you how I did that. Let me move everything aside. So I will take my embossing folder, and I love using 3D embossing folders, and this one gives so much detail. And if you take a look at the stamp set, you will see the embossing folder also has all those detailed lines, which I feel gives so much additional texture and dimension to your cards. So how I like to emboss my panels is, now Altenew folders have the name etched on this. So what I like to do is open the folder. This is the deboss side where you have the name written. This is the deboss side, which is like indented inside the embossing folder, and this is the raised part, which is the embossed side. So what I like to do is I like to place my panel or the die cut inside this folder like this, and since there are grooves here, it will fit in just like a puzzle piece. Now you'll see it's hanging out here, so all you need to do is slide this through the slit, and then we can puzzle piece it together, and all we have to do is close the embossing folder. You could also use a washi tape or any kind of masking tape just to make sure everything stays in place while you run it through your die cutting machine. And when you turn it around, everything fits perfectly. Now I'm using my Sizzix Big Shot die cutting machine for this, and it'll give absolutely beautiful results. So here is my embossed panel. You can see how beautiful that is. Now there are certain edges which have not been embossed. That is because it came out of my embossing folder. So I'm fine with it because I'll be creating an A2 size card, so we can chop off all of that. Next is, you could either ink blend on this or use your alcohol markers to add color to this, but we have coordinating stencils which will do the work for us. So these are the coordinating stencils We have, this is set of three actually. So we have two which create the leaves, which will help you add all the layers and colors on your leaves. And this one is interesting because this can be layered to create a beautiful textured background. You could use different shades of inks to give that depth and dimension look on your backgrounds, but we will be not using this today. Instead, we'll be using just these stencils. Now, all of these stencils are numbered. We have stencil number 1 and stencil number 2. But for figures like these, since they are alternating between the leaves, it's not, um, you don't have to worry about which stencil to use first. You can go with either of them. I will bring my ultra sticky mat and we will assemble everything together, and then we will start ink blending. Now here I have my ultra sticky mat. This is again by Altenew. So there we go. It fits perfectly within this. Now sometimes what happens is when you emboss on a panel, the paper might stretch a little, or it might, and since this is a curve and the paper that I was using is uh, 80-pound cardstock, so this did stretch a bit. So instead of directly placing it on the ultra sticky mat, what I will do is I will align this to my stencil first. So I'll turn the stencil around and I will align this again like we did with our embossing folder. This fits in like a puzzle piece. So there you have it. Now you know that all these pieces will be exactly where it's supposed to be. It's easy to align that way is what I feel, but then you could do however you feel comfortable with. So once we have the placement, then bringing in the second stencil won't be as difficult or as tricky as this one here is. So well, everything lines up perfectly. Take your time for this process because you don't want to mess up with any of that beautiful ink blending. And if, well, you don't have to be absolutely perfect as well. If you do mess up, I will show you a trick in the very end how we will fix that. Now you'll see here it's not perfectly aligning. I will go and align it once more, but it doesn't have to be as perfect because, well, this is a nature theme project, so you can have different dimensions and color combinations and varying textures on each of those ends, and it will turn out absolutely stunning. Now I decided to keep this monochromatic. I will be using just one color for my background, for this image, for my sentiments, everything. So I am choosing beautiful purples. Now this is shade of purple set. We have 4 different colors. We have the soft lilac, lavender fields, deep iris, and midnight violet. Now these are dye inks, which I absolutely love. I love the size of this ink pad, and Altenew does have larger size pads, but I prefer this one. We will be choosing 2 of the lavenders. I have lavender field and deep iris. Now whenever I'm ink blending, I like to use my ink pad holder. Now these are specifically designed to hold these mini ink pads. These are magnetic and from Glassport Studios, so whenever I use this, I can place this on my glass mat and it's not going to move. I also have bigger ones which will store your larger ink pads. Again, this is magnetic and this will stick to your magnetic glass surface. Now I'll start with the lightest shade. I'll keep this here. I'll start with the lightest shade, which is the lavender fields, and then we have deep iris. So I will begin with lavender fields. I'm taking a mini ink blending brush. I don't need a bigger one for this. This is a smaller ink blending brush by Altenew. I will take this and very lightly add color on my leaves. I'm not applying a lot of pressure here because I want very little color on my leaves. Slight ink blending is more than enough to get that gradient going. You could definitely use a rainbow of colors or any color combinations of your choice, greens, reds, blues even. Now there are some parts of the stencil which have these little tiny spaces. You can hold those down when you're ink blending. I like to hold it with my finger. You could even use your any kind of picky tool or pokey tool, whatever you call it. Hold it down so that it doesn't move or tear, or you don't want ink in places where you don't need them to be. I will add ink to all the open spaces on the stencil, and I'm being very gentle hand. I'm using a very gentle hand here. Not a lot of ink on my ink brush. And again, we don't need perfection. Some places you'll see that the ink is a lot darker as compared to on the edges of the leaves. That's totally up to your preference, but I like to have darker shades of ink towards the base of the leaf as compared to the outer parts of the leaf. Now, I'm using the same color for the branches as well. You could definitely go ahead and mask all the leaves and add browns or whatever color you prefer for the branches. But since we are going in for a monochromatic look, I wanted everything to have the same color. Alright, now we will move on to the next shade, which is deep iris. Now this one again is one of the darker shades of the same color family, and we will be adding this only on the base of the leaf, creating a shade or a gradient kind of feel. You can use a mini ink blending brush for this, those tiny ink blending brushes, but which looks something like this. This is a more detailed brush, but I will show you how I do it with this exact same brush. I take very little ink, and just at the tip I will add ink, and whatever is remaining I'll just pull it over to the edge of the leaf. So basically the tip of every leaf will have a darker tone. If you wanted, you could even bring in midnight violet, which is the darkest shade in that color family, but I'm using just these two shades for our project today. It's okay if part of that darker shade gets onto the tip of the adjacent leaf. I'm fine with that, but if you are very precise and want color only on the base of the leaf, make sure you mask off any of the other leaves where you don't want your color. So again, I'm holding that little piece, and we are going to add ink just to the base of the sleeve. You can either do it in circular motion or just flick some color onto your leaves. I will do the same with the stems as well. Now here you'll see some of that color got onto the tip of this leaf, but I am totally fine with that. I will leave it as is. again here this flap is overhanging, and I will hold it so that I don't tear my stencil accidentally or get ink in places where I don't want it to be. And that's it. We are done with layer number 1. I will peel this out. Now you'll see there are spaces here where there's no ink. We will fix that later on. We will now add stencil number 2 and color in the rest of the image just like we did with layer number 1. The beauty about these stencils is that they line up perfectly and you have the numbering written on them, so you know which side faces upwards. I will again bring in lavender fields, the same thing what we did with stencil number 1. I will though wipe this blending brush because we have the darker ink on it. I will rub it against my microfiber cloth and remove all that excess dark ink, and then we can go with lavender fields. I will hold any portion of the stencil which I feel is a little delicate or through which the ink can seep through onto the paper, and then add color to the remaining parts. I would love to know what kind of color combinations do you like. Would you want me to try maybe 2 different colors? Like pink and orange are my favorite color combinations. I have been obsessed with those colors for almost a year now. I love pink and orange, yellow and orange, pink and purple as well. Let me know in the comments what are your favorite color combinations. And that's it. Next, we will bring in deep iris. Now, you can also place your ink pad on the ultra sticky mat. It'll hold the ink pad in place and this is not going to move while you ink blend on your either stamped image or embossed image like these ones. I will again add the darker shade to the base of each of those leaves. If you hear some beep sounds, that's actually the baby monitor beeping, so sorry about that. I think I might add a little more purple over here. And that's it. I will carefully lift the stencil. Here you'll see there's a lot of white space on this, something I'm okay with, especially when it comes to nature inspired projects or anything floral. But if you're someone who does not like any white showing up, another thing you could do is whatever ink is left on your blending brush, just add that to tone down the white. So here you'll see, you can see the difference. This is the purple. Yes, the baby monitor is beeping. Here you see the purple and this is the white. So whichever you prefer, if you want, you could definitely tone it down. Well, there's not a lot of color on my blending brush, so I will bring in the lavender fields and lightly dab it. Now this is just to tone down our stark white on the background. You could leave it as is. Now this is not something that I like to do on my ultra sticky mat. I like to make sure that my piece is moving. So I bought this panel or this die cut piece on my glass mat, so that ink blending here is a lot more easy and it's easy to manipulate this piece around. There you go. So now that our piece is ready, I absolutely love how gorgeous that is, with the lighter shades on the inside and the darker ones on the outside. Now for my background as well, I want to keep the tone monochromatic. So let me first clean the glass mat. I just use some water. I spritz it with some water and wipe it with a microfiber cloth. So here I have my piece ready. Now all I have to do is mount it on an A2 size panel. Well, this panel is actually 4 by 5 1/4, which is slightly smaller than a standard A2 size card. This is my standard A2 size card, and you know I love having a slight border around the edges. So that's why you see the border. So now it's up to us how we want to place this entire foliage, either this way or this way. I do have a stamped sentiment, again something that I stamped using the same ink family, but this time I used Midnight Violet, which is the darker shade of ink. So I will be placing it somewhere here on the open gaps, or I like to have it overlapping as well. Either way works fine. But before that, I wanted to add some color to our background as well. Now for that, what I'm going to do, again, since we are going monochromatic, I'll be using these colors only. I will again start with lavender fields. I'll keep this aside, and I'm going to blend in the ink and keep this part fairly lighter. So we are going to get an ombre effect here. Well, we are trying to get an ombre effect. Now for blending an entire panel, I like to use these larger ink blending brushes by Altenio. You could go with a smaller one, but I feel this gives better results as compared to the smaller one. So here you can see my magnetic ink pad holder is holding everything in place. I will very gently add ink. If you want, you could just buff away the extra ink so that you don't get streaks of ink. Hi, mommy. Not a lot of color, it's just to tone down that white and to get a little bit of that monochromatic look going on into our background as well. I won't go till the very end of this panel. We will be coloring only this half of the diagonal. Next, I will bring in the deep iris. Which was my second darkest shade in the color family. And you'll see the ombre effect coming in. think I'm happy with that. We can place our panel and see how that looks, and I think I like that. Alright, so we have our panel and our die cut focal point ready, and well, our sentiment as well. But I wanted to add a little sub sentiment to this, so before I stick everything down, let's add our little sub sentiment here. I will place this panel onto my stamp wheel. I'll place everything as is just to get the placement right. Now from the stamp set, I'm going to choose the sentiment that says, I feel so blessed to have you in my life. Now since we already have so blessed, we will have to do some masking to stamp the sentiment which says, to have you in my life. So this is somewhat the placement that I want. What I'm going to do is I will get the exact placement of everything. I will make sure that I cut out this part, and any part that is not embossed or does not look right, I will move it out. And I like the white showing here. We will place our main sentiment, and then I will bring in my grid transparency sheet and we will line up our sentiment. Now there's a lot going on here, so this will not be as flat on the surface. That's okay. We just need to make sure that the sentiment is lined up straight. So I decided to stamp my sentiment somewhere over here. Which is almost the center of this card panel. I'll make sure it's perfectly lined up, and then I can pick the sentiment with the lid of the stamp wheel. I will remove everything out of place. Okay. And I just have this panel and I know where my sentiment goes. Now we have to do some masking because I only want part of the sentiment that says, to have you in my life. So for that, very simple thing, what I like to do is use a post-it note and just cover any part of the sentiment that I don't need to be stamped. You could even use masking tape, but I feel post-it note works just fine. Now for my sentiment, the main sentiment, I used Midnight Violet, which is the darkest shade. For this thing, I think I will use Deep Iris, which is the second darkest shade. Let's see how that goes. If I don't like the placement, I will definitely go and stamp it with the darker shade. Don't forget to remove your mask before stamping. Well, I have done that mistake a couple of times and I get all of that ink smudged there. I don't want to repeat that for this project, especially since we are live. I love that. It looks beautiful. I think I might stamp it again to get a little more crisp impression. Note that all of these inks are wet right now, and once it has time to dry down a little bit, the colors will tone down a lot more than what you see right now. I will again remove the masking tape and we will stamp the sentiment in place, and I absolutely love how this turned out. To remove my paper from the stamp wheel, all I do is just lift this, and I love how beautiful this turned out. Okay, now before we add in our sentiment, just one last thing to do is add some splatters. You know how much I love splatters on my cards, but again, usually I would go in for gold or black splatters, but here we are doing monochromatic splatters. So here we have our stamp block, and we will be using the same exact shades of color. If you have watercolors of the same exact shade, you could use that, but the best way to do it is to use the same exact ink pads, smoosh it on a stamp block, just like that. Then spray some water, get the color running and flowy. You could spray it as much or as little as you want. And then what I like to do is take a wet paintbrush, take some color on that, and just tap it all across the panel. If you wanted, you could also cover your sentiment, but I'm fine with it. I also decided that, well, I think we can add some splatters on this one as well. So I will bring it out, and I love how organic this looks. If I wasn't going for a monochromatic look, I would definitely go in for some beautiful gold splatters here. That's it. Now the best thing about splattering is there's no right or wrong way to do it. You just have fun with the colors. That's what I love when it especially comes to splattering. I will give it a minute or two to dry. Until then, we will add some foam tape and pop up our sentiments and this big focal point image. I'm using some foam. These are really very less dimension as compared to the regular foam tape that I use for my background panels. This will give it a pop, but not a lot. Now before I do that, we have this extra panel that we had created in the very beginning. I will stick both of these together just to give the entire thing a lot more stability, because this is a thin cardstock as compared to your normal card base, and it has been embossed. There's a lot of ink on it, so definitely it is quite flimsy as compared to the regular card itself. So for that, I will use some liquid glue. You could also use tape runner, but when lining things together, I like to use liquid glue because that gives me a little wiggle room to make sure everything lines up perfectly, especially since this piece is embossed. I know that the paper must have stretched a bit, so I don't want to take any chances by adding tape runner. I will have random dollops of liquid glue, and we can adhere this piece together. Not a lot, I don't want any of that glue oozing out, but good enough so that everything stays in place. Now here you'll see very light splattering. It's exactly what we wanted. And there you have it. Everything lines up beautifully. You can turn it around and press it so that both of these panels stick together. While that is done, I will bring in my foam circles, and we can add these to our die cut image. Well, you could directly adhere this panel onto the card base, but well, you know me, I love dimension on my cards. Yes, that's a lot of foam tape, but it's worth everything. I will take out all the backing. And we can now stick this onto our main panel. Like I mentioned, I will make sure that none of these pieces are on my main panel, so I will adhere it accordingly. Also making sure that I'm not covering my sentiment and some of that white part showing. So there you have it. We have some of the foam tape that has stuck to our glass mat, but that's fine. We can just turn this thing around and cut off any of that excess. I like to do that with my paper trimmer or my scissors, but since we have foam tape on that, I prefer using my scissors instead. I don't want all that sticky, gooey things coming on my paper trimmer. And that's it. Next, we will place our sentiment and we can call this card done. Now, since we have foam tape on the focal point image, we will have to add foam tape here as well for that sentiment to pop. I'm using the same exact foam tape here. Okay, that should be good. There we have it. Now I had not applied liquid glue on the backing for my focal point, but here I will because I need to make sure my sentiment is straight and aligned before I can finally commit to it. I will bring in my T-square ruler and make sure it's properly aligned. And since we have liquid glue behind the foam tape, it's not going to stick instantly. We can press it down once we feel that the alignment and the positioning is how we want it to be. And there you have it. Now we can go ahead and adhere this onto our card base. I will use liquid glue. Since we already have a lot of dimension and a lot of texture on our front, I decided to use liquid glue. If you wanted, you could also use some foam tape instead. And that's it. That's a look at our finished card. Let me know in the comments below what you think about it. Do you like the color combination? Well, this took some time because we had to figure out all the layering and the stenciling. Trust me, it takes a lot more time usually, but yeah, I mean, I had to finish my life quickly so that you could get going. But what do you think about this? Would you prefer any other color combination or black splatters, gold splatters? Let me know whatever you feel down in the description box below. Sorry, in the comment section. And I will have supplies in the description box below. Everything that I used, including the subscription and all the splattering. I will also have links to some of the alternative products that I like the gold metallic watercolors that I use, the black watercolor that I use, and all the brushes that I use today. These are something that I absolutely love. Now, all of these links, as I always mention in my videos, these are all affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of those links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Well, thank you again for joining me at my late night crafting. I will see you again next week. Bye bye.